Chloe Lancaster hated me for a lifetime, all because her family went bankrupt the year she turned 18. With nowhere else to turn, I used $20 million to buy her for marriage to bear my child. She cursed me for taking advantage of her desperation, never knowing it was the only way to save her entire family. Now I'm back, reborn. Watching her wear herself out for money all over again, I smiled. This time, I pushed her toward the man she truly loved. I was reborn. When I opened my eyes, it wasn't the sterile white of a VIP hospital room, but the study of my Manhattan penthouse. Sunlight streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long stripes of light across the hardwood floor. The air was rich with the aroma of freshly roasted coffee beans. Everything was exactly as I remembered it. The calendar on my desk was marked with a stark red circle, September 15th. I remembered this day. This was the day the Lancaster family's credit line finally snapped, sending them plummeting from the pinnacle of society into the gutter overnight. And it was the day Chloe Lancaster began to hate me for the rest of her life. In my last life, I was shackled to a woman who didn't love me, guarding a cold, empty tomb of a marriage. Even in death, she refused to be buried with me. She said she never wanted to see me again, not in the next life, not in the one after that. I closed my eyes, feeling the steady beat of my heart in this still young body. The dull ache that had pressed on my chest for decades seemed to have vanished with this absurd rebirth. Good. That was good. The phone on the desk buzzed, my assistant Mark's name flashing on the screen. I answered. Mr. Cole, about the Lancaster situation. Should we make our move? It's the perfect time to acquire their core assets. Mark's voice was laced with a barely suppressed excitement. In my last life, this was the moment I sent him to the Lancaster estate with $20 million in bearer bonds and a marriage contract. I had used the crudest, most dishonorable method to drag that untouchable debutante into my world. I thought it was a rescue. To her, it was predatory, a final kick when she was down, the beginning of a lifetime of shame. My actions were made to look even more villainous when set against the backdrop of her golden boy boyfriend, Ethan Vance, who had just started to make a name for himself but was powerless to help. It cast me as the absolute monster in her story. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a dull throb in my temples. It wasn't a hangover, but the exhaustion from a dream that had lasted far too long. Mark, I said, my voice hoarser than I expected. Yes, Mr. Cole. Halt all projects related to the Lancaster Group. All of them. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Mark was clearly baffled by the out-of-the-blue command. Mr. Cole, are you saying we're backing off? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The entire market is waiting for us to... I said, halt everything. I repeated, my tone hardening. Don't make me say it a third time. And leak a rumor. Tell them Julian Cole has no interest in the Lancaster family's mess. This time, I wouldn't be the villain. Chloe, don't you love your Ethan? Don't you believe your love is indestructible, that it can conquer anything? Go on then. Go to your hero. I want to see if that rising star you cherish so much can pull $20 million out of thin air to save you when you're your most desperate. After hanging up, I walked to the window. Below, the streets teemed with traffic, the entire city humming like a vast, intricate machine. And I was just a tired spectator, freshly escaped from a nightmare. This time, I just wanted to watch the show. As expected, an hour later, my doorbell rang. Through the foyer security monitor, I saw that familiar, yet distant face. Chloe Lancaster. She was wearing a faded sundress, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her face was pale, but she'd bitten her lips so hard they were drained of all color. Only her eyes were the same as when I first saw her in my last life, filled with a proud, unyielding stubbornness. She seemed to have paced outside my door for a long time before finally mustering the courage to press the bell. I didn't open it right away. I took my time, pouring myself a glass of whiskey and dropping in 2 large ice spheres. The amber liquid swirled, striking the ice with a crisp clink. In my last life, when she came to me, my palms were sweating with nerves. Now, my heart was perfectly still. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. I sauntered over and opened the door. Chloe stood in the doorway. The moment she saw me, a flicker of humiliation and shame crossed her defiant eyes, but she quickly suppressed it. She took a deep breath, as if summoning all her strength just to force out the words. Julian, I need money. Her voice was trembling. I leaned against the doorframe, an amused look on my face. Oh, the great Miss Lancaster has a day where she needs money. My voice was light, laced with a mocking tone I hadn't even realized was there. The color drained from Chloe's face. She clutched the hem of her dress, her knuckles white from the force of her grip. She knew I was humiliating her, but she had no other choice. My family went bankrupt. She lowered her eyes, her long lashes casting shadows on her cheeks. I need 20 million. If you help me, You? I cut her off, taking a sip of my whiskey. The cold liquid slid down my throat, a pleasant burn. What can you give me? In our last life, she had asked the same thing. And like a desperate fool, I had blurted out, I want you. Marry me. Give me a child. That sentence became the root of her hatred and the shackles of my life. Chloe's body went rigid. She must have expected me to repeat the same terms. Her shoulders trembled slightly, as if bracing for the coming degradation. She looked up, meeting my gaze directly. There were tears shimmering in her eyes, but beneath them was the steely resolve of someone with no way out. As long as you're willing to pay, you can have anything you want, except my life. Seeing her like this, I found it almost funny. So, in her mind, I was already a demon who would demand her life. I swirled the ice in my glass, the cubes clinking together. Chloe, you think far too highly of yourself. I saw it clearly, the resolve in her eyes shattered, replaced by utter disbelief. She never imagined I would say that. 20 million is nothing to me. I continued languidly. The question is, why should I give it to you? I can do anything for you. Anything. I let out a soft chuckle and took a step closer. She instinctively recoiled, her back hitting the cold wall. I leaned in, my mouth close to her ear, and spoke in a voice only the two of us could hear. For example, could you make that precious boyfriend of yours, Ethan Vance, get on his knees and beg me? Chloe's pupils contracted. She never thought I would bring up Ethan. To her, he was the softest, purest part of her heart, a place no one was allowed to tarnish. You're shameless. She was shaking with rage, her hand swinging toward my face. I caught her wrist easily. Her hand was cold and thin, her wrist so slender it felt like it would snap with the slightest pressure. See? You can't even do a little thing like that. I let her go and stepped back, creating distance between us. The smile on my face faded. So why should I help you? Chloe clutched her wrist, staring at me, seemingly unable to process what was happening. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. She had expected me to be a shark that smelled blood, to lunge at her with all sorts of degrading conditions. She had even prepared how she would resist with every fiber of her being. But she never imagined I wouldn't even be interested. Chloe, I said, looking at her bewildered face, suddenly feeling a wave of weariness. It's only 20 million. For your boyfriend, the so-called business prodigy, it shouldn't be a problem, right? I heard he just secured a significant round of funding. He's the man of the hour. You should be asking him, not a predator like me. I deliberately emphasized the word predator. The blood drained from Chloe's face. Of course she had gone to Ethan. The outcome, however, was probably less than ideal. I couldn't be bothered to deal with her any longer. I turned to close the door. Get out. Go find your hero. And don't dirty my floors. The door slammed shut behind me, blocking out her shocked, humiliated, and utterly disbelieving face. The study was quiet again. I went to the bar and poured another drink. No ice this time. The fiery liquid burned its way down my esophagus and into my stomach. It felt good. Chloe, this is only the beginning. In our last life, you made me suffer for a lifetime. In this one, I won't lay a single finger on you. I will watch with my own eyes as the love you were so proud of is crushed into dust by reality. Chloe didn't ring the doorbell again. My last words must have thoroughly infuriated her. A woman as proud as her could never tolerate me speaking of her and Ethan's love in such a contemptible way. I turned on the security monitor for the elevator lobby. She hadn't left. She was crouched in a corner, hugging her knees, her head buried deep. She looked like a small animal abandoned by the entire world. In my last life, seeing her like this would have made my heart ache so badly I could barely breathe. I would have rushed out, pulled her into my arms, and told her not to be afraid, that I was there. But now I just watched, my face devoid of expression. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mark. Mr. Cole, Lancaster Group's main creditors are already making moves. The one leading the charge is Bulldog Donovan from the west side. That guy's a shark, he'll strip them clean. If he gets to them first, there won't be anything left of the Lancaster family but bone fragments. Are we really doing nothing? I stared at the text, the image of Donovan's brutish, fleshy face flashing in my mind. In my past life, it was me who intercepted Donovan that very night, buying out all of the Lancaster debt from him at a 30% premium over market value. It cost me tens of millions extra and made an enemy of that vindictive local heavy. Chloe would never know about any of this. All she knew was that the next day, I showed up with those debt papers and forced her to sign that humiliating prenuptial agreement. I replied to Mark, "Watch and wait." Putting the phone down, I turned my attention back to the monitor. Chloe was finally moving. She took out her phone, apparently calling someone. I didn't have to guess who was on the other end. Ethan Vance, her lifeline, her hero. The call seemed to connect almost instantly. Chloe sat up straight, like a drowning person grabbing onto a piece of driftwood. Though I couldn't hear the sound, I could read her lips and see from her expression what she was saying. "Ethan, Julian Cole. He won't help me. He humiliated me," he said. Her shoulders started to shake. She was clearly crying. I watched silently, feeling not a single ripple in my heart. "Cry. Go ahead and cry. The louder, the better. It will only make your hero's heart ache for you more." Sure enough, Ethan must have said something comforting on the other end. Chloe's emotions gradually stabilized. She wiped away her tears, stood up, and a flicker of hope rekindled on her face. She nodded forcefully at the phone, then hung up and walked into the elevator without a backward glance. I smiled. It seemed her hero had made her a promise. What a beautiful love story. I turned off the monitor and changed my clothes. It was time to go to the office. The drama of the Lancaster family had just begun. As the sole member of the audience, I couldn't be late. For the next 3 days, the entire business world watched the Lancaster family become a laughingstock. The stock price of the Lancaster Group plummeted until the shares were worthless paper. Creditors, like hyenas smelling blood, swarmed in, seizing assets, clearing out offices, liquidating everything. The once glorious corporate tower became an empty shell in the blink of an eye. Chloe's father couldn't handle the shock. He had a massive heart attack and was admitted to the ICU. And me? For those 3 days, I went about my business as usual. Work, meetings, signing documents. Using my memories of the last life, I accurately predicted 2 investment projects that were about to implode, pulling out just in time and avoiding losses in the hundreds of millions. At the same time, I moved early to acquire an obscure tech company. In 6 months, that company would stun the entire industry with a disruptive new technology. My assistant, Mark, watched my swift and decisive actions over these few days with a mixture of awe and confusion. He probably couldn't understand why I would ignore the ripe fruit of the Lancaster assets, practically served on a platter, to pursue these seemingly unprofitable deals. He didn't know that I wasn't refusing to eat. I was just waiting for a better time, waiting for that fruit to be gnawed down to the pit by others, before its owner would willingly, gratefully deliver it to my hands. On the afternoon of the 4th day, I was in the middle of a video conference when Mark knocked and entered. His expression was strange, and he seemed hesitant to speak. I motioned for the conference to pause and looked at him. "What is it?" "Mr. Cole, Miss Lancaster is here." I raised an eyebrow, not surprised. "Let her wait." But Mark hesitated. "She's not alone. Ethan Vance is with her." Oh, now that was interesting. The hero was finally making his entrance. "Let them in." I leaned back in my chair, settling into a more comfortable position. The show was about to begin. A few minutes later, the office door opened. Chloe and Ethan walked in, one after the other. I hadn't seen her in days, and Chloe was a wreck. Her eyes were sunken, her lips were cracked, and her dress was hopelessly wrinkled. In contrast, Ethan, the man beside her, still looked the part. A well-tailored suit, not a hair out of place, and a perfectly calibrated, gentle smile on his face. The moment he entered, he extended his hand to me, his posture deferential. "Mr. Cole, I've heard so much about you. I'm Ethan Vance." I didn't move. I didn't even bother to lift my gaze, merely fiddling with the pen in my hand. Ethan's hand hung awkwardly in midair. The smile on his face froze for a second before he smoothly recovered. He was a smart man. He knew that in front of me, his young prodigy halo was worthless. "Mr. Cole," he said, retracting his hand, his tone neither servile nor arrogant. "I came today to talk to you about the Lancaster matter." "Talk." I finally looked up at him, the corner of my mouth twitching into a sarcastic smirk. "What makes you qualified to talk to me?" Ethan's face paled slightly. Behind him, Chloe couldn't stop herself from speaking up. "Julian, don't go too far." "I'm going too far?" I reacted as if I'd heard the world's greatest joke. "Miss Lancaster, have you forgotten who told you to get out 3 days ago, to go find your hero? Now you've brought your hero here. What's this? Is he here to pay back that 20 million for you?" My gaze bored into Ethan. A thin sheen of sweat appeared on Ethan's forehead. He forced himself to remain calm, took a document out of his briefcase, and pushed it across the desk toward me. "Mr. Cole, this is a gesture of my sincerity." I glanced at it. It was a business plan, beautifully written, full of grandiloquent language and promising prospects. Unfortunately, it was all bullshit. In my past life, I had seen countless proposals just like it. Their only value was to trick rookie investors. So, I said, tapping the proposal with my pen, "You're saying want to trade this piece of paper for $20 million? No, Ethan said, waving his hands frantically. Mr. Cole, you misunderstand. This isn't a trade. It's a partnership. My project has enormous potential. Once it succeeds, the return on investment will be tenfold, even 100-fold. I just need the seed capital. If you're willing to invest, I will give you 30% of the company's shares." He spoke with fiery passion, as if that 100-fold return was already in his pocket. Chloe stood behind him, her eyes filled with adoration and trust. In her world, her Ethan was the most capable man alive. He just needed a chance. I almost laughed out loud. "Ethan," I said his name. "Yes, Mr. Cole. Do you know what kind of businessman I despise the most?" He froze. "The kind like you," I said, picking up the business plan. Right in front of him, page by page, I tore it to shreds. "The kind of fool who brings me a pile of garbage and expects to walk away with a fortune." The scraps of paper fluttered down like snowflakes. Ethan's face turned a deep, blotchy red. You. He pointed a finger at me, so enraged he was speechless. This was likely the first time in his life he had ever faced such blunt humiliation. "What? You got a problem with that?" I stood up, walked over to him, and looked down at him. He was a good half a foot shorter than me. "Let me tell you, this nonsensical proposal of yours is riddled with holes. The so-called core technology you're boasting about was already obsolete in Europe 3 years ago. You think I don't know that? Your so-called user data model can't stand up to the slightest scrutiny. You haven't even done the most basic market research, and you have the nerve to come in here talking about 100-fold return. Ethan, who gave you the audacity?" With every sentence I spoke, Ethan's face grew a shade paler. By the end, he was ashen-faced and unsteady on his feet. Everything he was proud of had been mercilessly ripped apart and exposed for what it was. His vaunted talent was, in my eyes, nothing more than a joke. Chloe, who had been silent all this time, finally rushed forward to stand in front of him. "That's enough, Julian," she yelled at me, her eyes red. "If you won't help, fine, but why do you have to humiliate him like this?" Humiliate him? I looked at her, acting like a little animal protecting its own. It was both laughable and pathetic. "I'm merely stating the facts." "No, that's not true." She shook her head fiercely. "Ethan isn't like that. He's brilliant. He just needs time." "Time?" I sneered. "Miss Lancaster, your father is lying in the ICU, with his medical bills piling up to astronomical figures every day. Your circling creditors aren't going to give him time. What do you think will save you? The empty promises your hero is selling were cold, hard cash." That sentence was a knife that plunged deep into Chloe's heart. She staggered, her face deathly white. Ethan caught her, his eyes filled with venom as he looked at me. But he didn't dare say another word, because he knew I was telling the truth. "Mr. Cole," he said, taking a deep breath, his tone softening. "I know my proposal has its flaws, but please, believe me, give me a chance, I promise." "Get out," I said, cutting him off with a single word. Ethan's body went rigid. "Take your woman and your trash and disappear from my sight. Now, otherwise, I have no problem with having security escort you out." My voice wasn't loud, but every word was like an ice pick stabbing into their bones. Ethan's pride, finally and utterly crushed in the face of absolute power, shattered. He pulled the dazed Chloe along, scrambling away in a pathetic retreat. The office door closed, shutting out their presence. I sat back down in my chair, looking at the confetti of shredded paper on the floor, and suddenly felt bored. This was the man Chloe Lancaster had loved her entire life? An empty suit who was all talk. A coward who crumbled at the first sign of reality. It was profoundly uninteresting. News of Chloe and Ethan's humiliating exit from my office spread through our social circles like wildfire. Everyone knew that Ethan Vance had tried to pull a fast one and gotten publicly shamed for it. His carefully crafted young prodigy image collapsed overnight. The few investors who had shown interest in him quickly withdrew their offers. When it rains, it pours. That's the nature of business. And Chloe Lancaster became the biggest joke in town. People laughed at her for being so blind, for ignoring a golden ticket like me to put her faith in an empty suit. I could only imagine the pressure and despair she was facing. But I didn't care. It was her choice. I gave her a chance. She was the one who pushed me away and chose the hardest path. Over the following week, the Lancaster family situation went from bad to worse. Her father's condition deteriorated, and the daily expenses were bleeding them dry. Bulldog Donovan was out of patience, threatening to go to the hospital and pull the plug if he wasn't paid. Chloe had truly hit rock bottom. She sold off all her jewelry and designer bags, but the money she raised was just a drop in the bucket. As for Ethan, I heard he hadn't been seen for days. He was hiding, like an ostrich burying its head in the sand at the first sign of danger. I guess Chloe must have seen his true colors by now. But what did it matter? Hating the wrong person, loving the wrong person, that was her problem. I thought she would rather die than come to me again. I had underestimated her love for her father. On the evening of his 7th day, I had just finished a business dinner. My driver dropped me off at my apartment building. I saw a familiar figure curled up on a sofa in the lobby. It was Chloe. She looked even more haggard than the last time. Having lost so much weight, she looked like a gust of wind could blow her over. The lobby security had tried to get her to leave several times, but her pleading eyes had held them at bay. She just waited there, stubbornly. I got out of the car and walked past her without a glance. She saw me. With a thud, she knelt before me. Every head in the lobby turned. All eyes were on us. Security started to move toward her, but a look from me stopped them in their tracks. "Julian," she said, kneeling on the floor, her head tilted up to look at me. Her eyes, once so full of pride and defiance, now held nothing but a humble plea. "I'm begging you." Her voice was raspy, almost unrecognizable. "Save my father." I stopped and looked down at her. The marble floor was cold, and her knees were pressed directly against it. "I believe I told you," I said flatly, "not to dirty my floors." Her body trembled violently. Tears, like pearls from a broken string, streamed down her face. "I was wrong. Julian, I was so wrong. Please, for the sake of us knowing each other, please help me. I'll do anything. This time, I'll do anything." She was rambling, her words tumbling out in a chaotic mess. The murmuring around us grew louder. I frowned. "Get up." She didn't move, just shook her head, crying. "I'm ordering you to get up." My voice turned to ice. The chill in my tone seemed to frighten her. She finally, shakily, used the sofa to pull herself to her feet. "Follow me." I threw out 2 words and turned toward the elevator. She stumbled after me. Inside the elevator, it was just the 2 of us. The small space was filled with the faint scent of her, mingled with the smell of desperation. I said nothing. She didn't dare to speak, either, just kept her head down, wringing her hands. The elevator dinged as it reached the penthouse floor. I stepped out and opened the apartment door with my fingerprint. She followed me in, standing nervously in the foyer, not daring to take another step. I ignored her, walked to the living room sofa, sat down, and poured myself a glass of water. "Speak," I said, looking at her. "This time, what are you prepared to offer in exchange?" She looked up, her lips parting and closing a few times as if she was summoning every ounce of her resolve. "Me?" She said only 1 word, but I understood. I looked at her pale little face and suddenly found the situation ironic. After going in a circle, we were right back where we started. Only this time, she was the one making the offer. "You?" I scoffed. "Chloe, do you really think you're still worth $20 million? That sentence was more cutting than any insult. Her face went as white as a sheet of paper. She was right. The woman she was now. Family in ruins, reputation in tatters, father on his deathbed. She had nothing. What right did she have to negotiate with me? "Julian," she took a step forward, her voice choked with tears. "I know, I have nothing now. I'm not worthy, but I only have myself left. As long as you save my father, my life, it's yours." She closed her eyes, 2 streams of tears gliding down her cheeks. It was the look of someone who had completely surrendered their dignity and self-worth. I looked at her, feeling no pity, only a strange and inexplicable irritation. In my last life, I had dreamed of hearing her say those words, but now they just felt annoying. "Cut the cheap melodrama," I said coldly. "I'm not interested in your life." Her eyes snapped open, and she stared at me in disbelief. "I'm a businessman, Chloe." I stood up, went to my study, and pulled a document from a drawer, one I had prepared long ago. I tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. "I only make deals." She looked down and saw the large words at the top of the document. "Personal assistant, Adrian. She was stunned. "What is this?" "A contract," I said succinctly. "I provide the money. I save your father, and I settle all of your family's debts." A flicker of hope ignited in Chloe's eyes. In exchange, my next words plunged her into an icy abyss. "From this day forward, you, Chloe Lancaster, are Julian Cole's exclusive assistant. For a term of 5 years. For 5 years, all of your time belongs to me. You will be on call 24/7. You will not disobey. No vacations, no salary. Your job is to repay the debt you owe me. Do you understand? I stared at her, enunciating every single word. Chloe signed the contract. She didn't hesitate for a second. She picked up the pen and at the bottom of the document signed her name. The letters were crooked and unsteady, but the pressure of the pen was immense. It was a contract of indenture. After signing, she seemed to deflate completely, collapsing onto the rug. I picked up the contract, glanced at her signature, and then made a call. Mark, transfer $5 million to Metro General Hospital's account immediately. Also, contact Bulldog Donovan. Tell him I'm taking over the Lancaster debt. Have him bring the paperwork to my office tomorrow morning. And leak the news. As of today, the Lancaster Group answers to the name Cole. I gave the orders one by one, right in front of her. She knelt on the floor, head tilted up, staring at me blankly. Her eyes held gratitude, confusion, and a flicker of dependence that she herself hadn't noticed. That realization made me deeply uncomfortable. Starting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp, I said, putting away my phone and looking down at her. Report to my office. My new assistant. Be 1 minute late, and your father's ICU room gets downgraded to a regular ward. With that, I turned and walked in my bedroom without a second glance. The moment the door closed, I heard her suppressed sobs. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 7:50. Chloe was already waiting outside my door. She had changed into a clean white blouse and black slacks, probably the last decent outfit she owned. Her hair was neatly combed, but her face was still pale and drawn. When she saw me, she immediately stood up straight, lowered her head, and said respectfully, "Mr. Cole." I didn't respond, walking straight in my office. She followed me in, a lost shadow. Today's coffee. Hand ground. No sugar, no cream. I dropped my briefcase on the desk and gave the order without looking up. "Yes, sir," she answered softly and went to the break room. A few minutes later, a fragrant cup of coffee was placed on my desk. I took a sip. It tasted exactly as I remembered. In my past life, she made coffee for me for 10 years. I put the cup down and started on my work. She just stood there quietly, like a doll. "What are you standing there for?" "Waiting for an invitation to sit." I snapped. She flinched, then quickly sat in the chair across from my desk, her back ramrod straight. "Read this file. I want a summary in 30 minutes. I tossed a thick project report at her. She quickly caught it and began reading with intense focus, her long lashes casting a small shadow on her cheeks. I suddenly realized this was probably the first time I had ever looked at her this closely in broad daylight, in a completely sober state. In our past life, our interactions were almost exclusively at the dinner table or in the bedroom. She would always keep her head down, eating in silence, enduring in silence. And I would try every method imaginable to pry her shell open, to make her look at me. The result was always the same: arguments, followed by an even deeper silence. Now, she was sitting right across from me. Her identity was my assistant. Between us was nothing but a cold, transactional relationship. Maybe this was for the best. 30 minutes later, on the dot, she placed a handwritten summary on my desk. The handwriting was neat. The points were clear and well organized. It was better than I'd expected. It seemed the high and mighty Miss Lancaster wasn't a complete fool after all. "Do it again." I barely glanced at it before tossing it back. She froze. "Why?" "There's no why," I said coldly. "The work my assistant submits is not allowed to have a single flaw." Her lips moved as if to argue, but in the end, she said nothing. She picked up the summary, returned to her seat, took out a fresh sheet of paper, and began to revise. I watched her stubborn profile, feeling no sense of victory, only an inexplicable irritation. What the hell was I doing? Was I keeping her by my side to torture her, or to torture myself? It was a question to which I had no answer. Chloe's days as my assistant were not easy. I treated her like a real subordinate, even more harshly than I treated anyone else. I had her transcribe the most tedious meeting minutes, verify the most mind-numbing financial reports. Sometimes I would make her work all night to correct a single punctuation error. She never argued, never complained. She just silently accepted every task and then completed it with meticulous care. She lost weight quickly, the dark circles under her eyes growing more pronounced, but the defiance in those eyes never faded. People in the office started whispering about us. They said I was cruel and ruthless, torturing a former socialite until she was a shadow of her former self. Others said Chloe deserved it for being so blind in the first place. These whispers inevitably reached her ears, but she acted as if she heard nothing. Every day, she would arrive quietly and leave quietly, like an emotionless machine. The only time a flicker of life appeared on her face was in the evenings, when she went to the hospital to visit her father. I had someone watching the hospital 24/7, not to monitor her, but to ensure her father's safety. A lowlife like Bulldog Donovan was capable of anything. I never told her about this. Our relationship remained as cold and hard as two stones. Until that day, Ethan Vance showed up again. He had somehow found out I was attending a business reception and crashed the event. At that moment, I was holding a glass of champagne, chatting amiably with a business partner. Chloe, as my assistant, was standing just behind me. Ethan saw her instantly. He rushed over, grabbed her by the wrist, his eyes bloodshot. "Chloe, why are you debasing yourself like this? What did he give you to make you follow him so blindly?" His voice was loud, immediately drawing the attention of the entire room. The color drained from Chloe's face. She struggled to pull her arm away, but Ethan's grip was like iron. "Let go," she hissed. "I won't." Ethan was highly agitated. "You're coming with me. I can't just stand by and watch you be destroyed by this bastard." He started to drag her away by force. I frowned, placing my champagne flute on a passing waiter's tray. I walked over and, without a word, simply closed my hand around Ethan's wrist. I didn't use much force, but Ethan grimaced as if his wrist were caught in a vice, and he immediately let go of Chloe. "Cole, let go of me," he yelled, his voice a mixture of bravado and fear. I ignored him, my gaze falling on Chloe, who looked disheveled and distraught. A clear red mark was already forming on her wrist. "My assistant," I said, looking at Ethan, my voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight of authority, "doesn't seem to have any obligation to leave with you. She's my girlfriend. We're just on a break." Ethan blustered. "Girlfriend?" I smiled, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. "Miss Lancaster, is that true?" I tossed the question to Chloe. Every eye in the room was now fixed on her. She had become the center of this pathetic drama. She took a deep breath, lifted her head, and met Ethan's gaze. Her expression was one I had never seen before, icy and utterly foreign. "Ethan," she began, her voice steady, every word crystal clear, "the day you abandoned me and my dying father to go into hiding, we were over. Right now, I am Mr. Cole's assistant. I would appreciate it if you would stop harassing me in the future." Ethan looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. He probably never imagined that the Chloe who had once adored him, who would have done anything for him, could speak with such finality. "Chloe, how could you say that?" He stammered, a wounded look on his face. "Why couldn't I?" Chloe let out a self-deprecating laugh. "In your eyes, I was just a ladder for you to climb, a trophy for you to show off. What did you ever actually care if I lived or died? When you brought that joke of a business plan to try and scam Mr. Cole, all you were thinking about was your own ambition. Did it ever cross your mind that my father was in a hospital bed, waiting for money that could save his life?" "Ethan, I was so blind." After saying her piece, she looked as if she had expended all her energy. She turned away from Ethan and faced me, lowering her head slightly. "Mr. Cole, I apologize for the trouble I've caused." I released Ethan's wrist. He crumpled to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. I looked at Chloe. Her head was bowed, and I couldn't see her expression. But I knew, from that moment on, she and Ethan Vance were truly, completely finished. "The reception is over," I said calmly. "We're leaving." "Yes, sir." I turned and walked away, and she immediately followed. She never once looked back at the man on the floor, the man she once loved to the bone, and now discarded like trash. The car ride back was heavy with silence. The driver kept glancing at us in the rearview mirror, too nervous to make sound. Chloe kept her head down, staring at the tips of her shoes. The only sound in the car was the soft whisper of our breathing. "Your hand," I said suddenly. She started, not understanding. "Your wrist," I repeated. She finally understood and hesitantly held out her left hand, the one Ethan had grabbed. The red mark on her wrist had already started to bruise, a dark purple against her pale skin, glaringly conspicuous. I took a tube of ointment from the car's glove compartment and tossed it to her. "Put this on." She took the ointment and whispered, "Thank you." Then she twisted off the cap and began silently applying it to her wrist. Her movements were light and slow, as if she were handling a piece of delicate porcelain. I watched her profile in the dim light of the car, her features softened by the shadows. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Tell you what?" She looked up, her expression blank. "That Ethan was harassing you." "It's my personal business," she said, looking down again and continuing to rub in the ointment. "I didn't want to bother you, Mr. Cole." "Your personal business?" I scoffed. "Miss Lancaster, have you forgotten that your contract clearly states that for 5 years, Everything about you belongs to me, including your troubles. Her hand stilled. She looked up, her gaze fixed on me, her expression complicated. Mr. Cole, she began after a long pause. Why are you doing this to me? You can have. Taking your revenge in a more direct way humiliated me. Like that day when Ethan came to see you. Why are you keeping me by your side, doing all these? She struggled to find the right words. Doing all these what? I pressed. Doing all these things that seem like you're training me. She finally voiced the question that had been weighing on her mind. Yes, training. For the past few months, though I had been relentlessly hard on her, the tasks I gave her were all related to the company's core projects. I forced her to study dry financial statements, to analyze complex market data, to negotiate with cunning old sharks we did business with. She was like a sponge I had shoved underwater, forced to absorb everything. She was learning at an astonishing rate. From being unable to even write proper meeting minutes, she could now independently manage a multi-million-dollar project. Even Mark had told me in private, Mr. Cole, you struck gold. Miss Lancaster is a natural-born businesswoman. Of course, I knew that. In my past life, after I died, she single-handedly propped up the entire Cole Corporation, leading it to unprecedented heights. She wasn't a natural. She was forged by my death, by the cruel realities of the world, into an iron lady. In this life, I was just accelerating the process. Why? I looked into her searching eyes and was suddenly struck by a playful impulse. I leaned closer to her, my lips almost brushing her ear, and said in a suggestive whisper, because I find watching you like this far more entertaining than watching you kneel and beg me. Her body went rigid. A flush of heat spread from the tips of her ears across her entire face. She jerked back abruptly, her back pressing hard against the car door like a startled deer. She stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Seeing her flustered state, my mood inexplicably improved. Sit still, I said, leaning back against the seat and closing my eyes. You're being too loud. As I expected, she didn't dare move or make another sound. But I could clearly smell that in the faint, sweet scent that was uniquely hers, a new note of flustered sweetness had been added. Life continued in this detached, bland way. Chloe's professional skills grew sharper by the day, but she spoke less and less. Outside of work, we had zero communication. She was like the perfect tool, precise, efficient, and devoid of emotion. Sometimes, I get the unnerving feeling that the wife from my previous life, the one who was as cold as ice to me, had returned. The thought infuriated me, so I started coming up with new ways to torment her, making her stand beside me during a meeting and peel grapes for an entire hour, making her serve my plate and taste my food for poison when I was entertaining clients. On days I was in a foul mood, I'd even make her read the financial news aloud to me. She did it all without a word, her face a mask of indifference, completely submissive. The way people at the office looked at her grew stranger. It went from pity to contempt and finally to a kind of knowing ambiguity. They all assumed I'd taken a fancy to her and was using this bizarre method as a form of courtship. I didn't care what anyone thought. I just wanted to see a different expression on her face, something other than numb obedience. But I failed. She was like a soulless doll, letting me manipulate her however I pleased, showing no reaction at all. Until that night. I was working late, pulling an all-nighter to close an overseas acquisition deal. Chloe stayed with me. At 3 a.m, the deal was finally settled. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted, pinching the bridge of my nose. Go make me a coffee, I ordered. She rose silently and went to the break room. I closed my eyes, waiting for that familiar aroma. I waited for a long time. The coffee never came. Instead, there was a loud crash, the sound of shattering porcelain. My eyes snapped open. I rushed into the break room. Chloe was collapsed on the floor, unconscious. At her feet lay the shattered remains of a coffee mug in a puddle of brown liquid. Her face was ashen. I ran to her side and felt her forehead. It was burning hot. She had a fever. It was only then that I remembered she had looked unwell all day, and I had ignored it. Damn it, I had actually ignored it. A nameless rage surged within me, but underneath it was a panic I was unwilling to admit, even to myself. I scooped her up from the floor. She was so light like a feather, barely a weight in my arms. I carried her out of the office, put her in my car, and sped to the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, the doctor examined her. Acute gastroenteritis, complicated by overwork and exhaustion. A high fever of 103, 6° F. She needed an 4-drip and to be admitted for observation. I looked at Chloe lying in the hospital bed, her lips cracked and her brow furrowed in pain, and a heavy weight settled in my chest. I sat by her bedside and watched over her all night. She finally stirred just as the sun was rising. She opened her eyes, and the moment she saw me, her expression filled with alarm and anxiety. She struggled to sit up. "Mr. Cole, I'm so sorry. Lie down." I pressed her back down, my voice thick with an anger I couldn't control. "Are you trying to kill yourself?" My shouting stunned her. Her eyes instantly reddened. I realized I had lost my composure. Taking a deep breath, I softened my tone. "The doctor said you need a rest." She looked down, saying nothing, just biting her lip hard. The room fell into a dead silence. "Why didn't you tell me?" I couldn't stop myself from asking. She didn't answer. "Chloe, I'm talking to you." "What good would it have done?" she finally replied, her voice hoarse and tinged with self-mockery. "Would you have given me the day off?" Her words struck me dumb. It was true. Would I have? I probably would have thought she was trying to slack off and tormented her even more. "In your eyes, I'm nothing more than a tool to repay a debt." She looked up, meeting my gaze directly. There were no tears in her eyes, only a vast, barren emptiness. A tool doesn't get sick, and a tool doesn't need rest. My heart felt as if it had been seized by an invisible hand, squeezed so tightly I could barely breathe. So this was how she saw me. So everything I had done over the past few months was, in her eyes, nothing but relentless torture. I thought I was forcing her to grow. It turned out I was just pushing her into a deeper abyss. I looked at her colorless face and suddenly felt like a complete and utter bastard. After that incident, the atmosphere between us became even stranger. I gave her 3 days off. When she returned to work, she was still the same quiet, reserved person, but now there was a new layer of distance and caution in her eyes when she looked at me. I stopped deliberately tormenting her. Our relationship became purely that of a boss and a subordinate. Professional, concise. The days passed quickly like this. In the blink of an eye, a year had gone by. Under my careful tutelage, Chloe had transformed from a clueless rookie into a project manager who could hold her own. The delicate, naive air of the Lancaster heiress had been completely worn away. In its place was a capable, confident professionalism. She was becoming more and more like the woman from my past life, the decisive female CEO who dominated the business world. Except the look in her eyes when she saw me grew colder and colder. I sometimes wondered if I had made a mistake. I had molded her into the person I was most familiar with, but in doing so, I had pushed her further and further away. One day, I asked her to organize an old investment file. It was a project I had worked on 5 years ago that now needed reevaluation. She walked into my office carrying a stack of documents nearly as tall as she was. "Mr. Cole, the files you requested. Put them in that corner," I said, pointing to an empty space. She walked over, set the files down, and turned to leave. "Wait," I called out. "Is there anything else, Mr. Cole? Come here. Organize these files for me in chronological order." I pointed at the mountain of paper. It was a purely menial task, something far below the pay grade of a project manager. I was doing it on purpose. I wanted to see if she would refuse. She remained silent for a moment, but ultimately said nothing, walked over, and crouched down to begin sorting. I watched her back, a wave of frustration washing over me. I picked up a report from my desk, but couldn't read a single word. My eyes kept drifting to the figure crouched in the corner. She worked diligently and quietly. The only sound in the office was the soft rustle of paper. Suddenly, she stopped. She pulled a thin folder from the pile of documents and stared at it, stunned. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just slowly stood up, holding the folder, and walked toward me, one step at a time. Her face was paler than I had ever seen it. Her eyes were wide with shock, confusion, and a storm of emotions I couldn't decipher. She stopped in front of me and placed a folder on my desk. "What is this?" Her voice was trembling. I looked down at the folder. My pupils contracted sharply. It was the risk assessment report I had commissioned when I acquired the Lancaster Group in my previous life. It detailed exactly how many other companies had been circling, waiting to devour her family's assets. It also detailed the vicious tactics they were planning to use against her family, against her father. Things like fabricating evidence to have him jailed for commercial fraud, or setting traps to bury him under an insurmountable mountain of black market debt. Compared to those schemes, my seemingly predatory marriage contract was an act of charity. This file was a relic from my past life. After I was reborn, I had locked it away in the bottom drawer of my study. I had no idea how it had gotten mixed in with these old corporate archives. Perhaps an assistant had accidentally bundled it with company documents while organizing my study once. I never, ever imagined it would reappear like this, right in front of her. I asked you, "What is this?" Chloe's voice rose, her emotions escalating when I didn't answer. It's exactly what it looks like. An old file. I forced myself to remain calm, speaking flatly. An old file? She laughed, a bitter, self-mocking sound. Julian, how long are you going to keep lying to me? The name's in here. Bulldog Donovan, Rick Snyder. All of these people, they came after my father back then. The terms they offered were worse than anything a devil could dream up. All this time, I thought it was you, that you sicked them on us. I thought you were one of them. But this report, it says that you were the one who held them all off. You spent an extra $50 million to buy our debt from them. You made so many enemies. Why? Why would you do that? She looked at me, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. Why did you never tell me? I looked at her tear-streaked face, my mind in turmoil. How was I supposed to answer that? Tell her it was because I loved her? Because I couldn't bear to see her suffer even the slightest bit? No, I couldn't. I took a deep breath, met her gaze, and said, word by word, because it was a good business deal. Chloe, I've told you before, I'm a businessman. A businessman acts based on profit, not sentiment. I helped you because I decided you still had value. That's all. I spoke with a detached air, as if discussing the most mundane of transactions. The color drained from Chloe's face, bit by bit. She looked at me as if I were a complete stranger. After a long moment, she gave a wretched smile. Of course. How could I forget? You're a businessman. She threw those words at me, turned, and walked out of my office without looking back. The door closed softly behind her. And in that moment, my world came crashing down. After that confrontation, Chloe submitted her resignation. The reason cited personal matters. I stared at the resignation letter, politely worded, yet radiating a sense of absolute finality, for a long time. In the end, I signed it. Approved. I handed the signed letter to her as she stood before me. She took it without a glance and put it in her purse. Thank you, Mr. Cole. She gave a slight bow. According to the contract, my 5-year term isn't finished. I will have the remaining time converted to a cash equivalent and paid to you. There's no need, I said flatly. You've already earned me far more than that amount. Business is business, she insisted. I'll have my lawyer contact your finance department. With that, she bowed again. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving. She turned to go. Chloe, I called out. She stopped, but didn't turn around. What are your plans now? I asked. That's no concern of yours, Mr. Cole. Her voice was as cold as ice. I looked at her back and was suddenly struck by the feeling that I had just made the stupidest decision in the entire world. I had let her go. With my own 2 hands, I had pushed her out of my world. Just like in our last life, when she had locked me out of her heart. Wasn't this a kind of karma? After Chloe left, my life seemed to return to normal. Meetings, business dinners, signing documents. Everything was the same as before. Except there was a quiet figure missing from the office. The coffee from the break room no longer tasted the way I was used to. A dull ache started in my stomach. I went through several assistants, but none of them worked out. They were either too talkative, too incompetent, or too ambitious. None of them were her. I started having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake all night, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying images of her on a loop. Her crying, her smiling, her defiance, her vulnerability. I only then realized, without even noticing, how deeply she had carved herself into my heart. I started having people keep tabs on her. I learned that she hadn't left the city. With the money I had given her, she had opened a small flower shop. I learned her father's condition had stabilized, and he had been moved to a regular ward. I learned that Ethan Vance had been sentenced to 3 years in prison for fraud, and I learned that she had never once gone to visit him. Not even once. It seemed she really had started a new life. A life without me and without Ethan. That realization filled me with a sense of panic. I started driving to her flower shop, unable to stop myself. I didn't dare get close. I would just park down the street, hidden in my car, and watch her. She would be in a cotton dress and an apron, bustling among the flowers. The sunlight would fall on her, and she would have a peaceful smile on her face that I had never seen before. She looked happy, happier than she had ever been when she was with me. I was like a stalker, a pathetic coward, watching her every day. I watched her chat and laugh with customers. I watched her hold a cat while sunning herself by the door. I watched her, little by little, become someone I didn't recognize at all. And I was trapped right where I was, unable to go anywhere. The 5-year term was soon up. On the final day stipulated in the contract, I received an email from Chloe's lawyer. It contained proof that all her debts had been paid in full. The last thread connecting us was severed. That night, I drank heavily. I returned to that empty penthouse, looked out at the city lights, and suddenly felt like the loneliest person in the world. I had unimaginable wealth and absolute power. but I didn't have a single person I could talk to. I took out my phone and, as if possessed, dialed the number that was etched into my memory, but which I had never dared to call. The phone rang for a long time. Just as I was about to hang up, thinking no one would answer, the call connected. Hello. It was her voice, cool and clear, with a hint of confusion. I clutched the phone, unable to say a word. Who is this? She asked again. It's me. My own voice came out, so hoarse it was unrecognizable. There was a long silence on the other end. I could almost picture her frowning. Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Cole? She still called me Mr. Cole, polite and so distant. No, I said with a self-deprecating laugh. Wrong number. I was about to hang up. Julian. But she suddenly said my name. My heart leaped. It was the first time she had called me by my full name. Not Mr. Cole, not Julian Cole, but Julian. Are you free tomorrow? She asked. I was stunned. What? My father would like to see you, she said. He wants to thank you in person. My mind went completely blank. Okay, I heard myself say. The next day, I canceled all my meetings and arrived an hour early at the place she had specified. It wasn't a hospital, but a quiet, elegant tea house. When I arrived, she and her father were already there. Mr. Lancaster was in a wheelchair, but his complexion was much better than I had imagined. When he saw me, he struggled to stand up. I quickly went over and gently pressed him back down. Mr. Lancaster, please stay seated. Mr. Cole. He looked at me, his expression complex. Thank you. Back then, if it wasn't for you, this old life of mine and Chloe. I'm afraid. He didn't finish, just let out a heavy sigh. It was nothing, I said, not knowing what else to say. It may have been nothing to you, but to my daughter and me, you saved our lives. As he spoke, Mr. Lancaster took a velvet box from his pocket and pushed it toward me. This is the only thing our family has left. It's a small token of our gratitude. Please accept it. I opened the box. Inside was a piece of exquisite jade, carved into the shape of a Chilan. I recognized it. It was the Lancaster family heirloom. In my last life, Chloe had treasured it more than her own life. This is too valuable, I said, pushing the box back. Mr. Cole, if you don't accept it, you'll be disrespecting us, Mr. Lancaster insisted. I looked at Chloe. She was sipping her tea quietly, not looking at me, not saying a word. I had no choice but to accept it. We made some more small talk, and then Mr. Lancaster said he was tired. Chloe pushed his wheelchair, and they left first. I sat alone in the tea house for a long time. It wasn't until sunset that I finally got up to leave. As I reached the entrance, I saw Chloe standing under a sweet olive tree, seemingly waiting for me. Why haven't you left? I asked. I have something for you, she said, pulling a small flower pot from behind her back. And it was a thriving succulent. What's this for? I looked at the plant confused. I grew it myself at my shop, she said. I heard they can protect against radiation. You have so many computers in your office, you could probably use it. I took the succulent. It was surprisingly heavy. Thank you. You're welcome. She smiled, a smile like the autumn sun, warm but not scorching. Julian, she said, looking at me seriously, what's past is past. You saved my father. You saved our family, and I am very grateful. But that's all it is. We're even now. With that, she waved at me, turned, and walked away toward the setting sun. Her shadow stretched long behind her. I stood there, watching her walk further and further away, until she disappeared around the corner. The succulent in my hand suddenly felt as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. I got back in my car and carefully placed the plant on the passenger seat. Then, I started the engine and followed her. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that this time, I wasn't going to let go. If you like this, please leave a comment. If this gets over 100 likes, I'll continue it as a full-length novel. I also welcome custom story prompts in the comments, something like a sweet college romance. If I see it, I'll write a story based on your request. Of course, the more detail you provide, the better.